My name is Avery Langford, and I've learned betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it sits across from you at your own family table. On New Year's Eve, I asked, "Is there a seat for me?" My mom smirked and said, "This table is only for the chosen ones." My brother laughed so hard it echoed inside me, and I walked out into the freezing night. The next afternoon, that same brother called, voice shaking, "I need $18,000 immediately." I whispered, cold and steady, "Ask the chosen ones." I thought it was over, until an envelope arrived. I grew up in a house where silence was louder than words. My parents never needed to tell me I wasn't their priority. I could feel it in the way chairs were pulled out at dinners, in the way photos were framed in the hallway, and how my name always came last when introductions were made. My brother Marcus was the star. He got the best seat at every table, his trophies lined the mantel, and his stories filled the room. I was the shadow in the corner, expected to listen, not to speak. When I was 8, I remember sneaking into the kitchen during his birthday party. The whole house smelled like frosting, and balloons squeaked against the ceiling. I pressed my face against the doorframe just to get a glimpse of him blowing out candles. My mom spotted me and said without even lowering her voice, "Avery, you weren't invited in here. Learn your place." I went back to my room and sat on the carpet, listening to their laughter drift up the stairs. That memory never really left me. It wasn't about a cake. It was about belonging, and I knew even then that I didn't. Years later, nothing had changed. At family gatherings, I stood to the side while Marcus held court. He was magnetic in their eyes even when his stories were half-truths. My father would clap him on the back, my mother would refill his glass, and I would wait for the moment someone noticed I was standing there. They never did. By the time I turned 28, I'd stopped expecting an invitation. I lived alone in a small apartment across town, worked a steady job, paid my bills, and kept to myself. Still, some part of me hoped things could be different. That's why on New Year's Eve, I found myself walking into their house again. Maybe I thought a new year meant a new start. Maybe I just wanted to believe my seat was waiting after all these years. The house looked the same as it always had, polished hardwood floors, a chandelier that hummed faintly when the bulbs flickered, the smell of my mother's perfume clinging to the air. Everyone was dressed in their best, glasses in hand, ready for midnight. I stood near the table, my palms sweating, and asked almost under my breath, "Is there a seat for me?" My mother didn't miss a beat. She took a drag from her cigarette and said, "This table is only for the chosen ones." Marcus laughed so loudly it rattled my chest. The rest of the family smirked, eyes darting like they were waiting for me to disappear. My legs felt heavy, but I forced myself to turn, my heels clicking against the wood as I walked out the front door. Outside, fireworks split the sky, but I couldn't feel the celebration. The air was freezing, biting into my skin. I walked until the house was out of sight, until my reflection in a shop window showed a woman who looked like a stranger. It wasn't anger that night, it was humiliation. A reminder that I would never belong at their table. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen counter, and told myself it was just another holiday gone wrong. My phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus's name flashed across the screen. I almost let it ring out, but something in me wanted to hear what he had to say. His voice wasn't cocky this time. It was shaky. "Avery, I need $18,000. Immediately. Please." For a moment, I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch until he could hear my breathing. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I simply said, "Happy New Year. Ask the chosen ones." Then I hung up. I thought that was it, that I'd finally drawn the line. But 2 minutes later, someone knocked on my door. The sound wasn't threatening, it was deliberate, steady. I opened it to find a courier shivering in the cold, holding out an envelope with my name stamped across the front. I took it, closed the door, and tore it open at the counter. Inside was a notice of default. Amount due $18,000. At the bottom were 2 signatures. His scrawl messy as always, and next to it a neat forgery of mine. My stomach dropped. The paper trembled in my hands, but not from weakness, from rage. That was the moment I realized last night's humiliation wasn't just about being excluded. It was the setup for something far worse. I stood at the counter, staring at the paper until the letters blurred. The edges cut into my palms because I was gripping it too tight. My own name, written in neat strokes I had never signed, stared back at me like a stranger wearing my skin. Forgery wasn't just a trick, it was theft. It was someone reaching into my life and trying to take ownership of it. I dropped the envelope flat on the counter, the sound sharp against the quiet of my apartment. The walls felt closer, listening, waiting to see what I'd do. My phone buzzed again, the vibration rattling against the wood. A new message popped up from the family group chat. "Mom, don't be dramatic. He's under pressure. Dad, step up for once, Avery. Marcus, just handle it. We're all embarrassed by your attitude. Embarrassed." That word stuck in my throat. They weren't the ones staring at a debt they never touched. They weren't the ones being erased at the dinner table only to be resurrected as collateral. I laughed out loud, sharp and hollow, but it didn't ease the weight pressing on my chest. The phone buzzed again, this time Marcus calling. I let it ring twice before I answered. His voice came fast, frantic, like he thought speed would erase guilt. "Avery, listen, I didn't mean for it to go this far. They needed a cosigner. You weren't supposed to find out. I'll fix it, just send the money and we'll sort it out later." I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to hear my breathing, wanted him to know I was still there but unwilling to play his game. "You forged my name," I said slowly. "That's not fixing. That's burying me." He stammered, "It's temporary. Please. They'll come after me if you don't pay." "Then let them come," I snapped and hung up. My hands were trembling now, but not from fear, from fury. Mom's call came minutes later. Her voice was tight, rehearsed. "Avery, you need to stop making this bigger than it is. Families handle things privately." "Privately," I repeated. "You mean quietly. You mean cover for him." "He's your brother," she said like it was the only argument she needed. "And I'm your daughter," I shot back. But that never seemed to matter. She sighed, heavy, tired. "We've always done what's best for the family." That line burned hotter than the forged signature. Best for the family, which really meant best for Marcus. Always Marcus. I ended the call before she could continue. My apartment fell into silence again, but it wasn't comforting. Every creak of the floor sounded like footsteps. Every vibration of my phone felt like another demand, another shove into the role I was supposed to play. Cleanup crew. Invisible when they didn't need me, indispensable when they did. I sat down on the couch, staring at the envelope on the counter. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the street lamp outside, shadows stretching across the walls. My chest felt heavy, but underneath that weight was something steadier. Anger had settled low, like embers refusing to die. I thought back to another time Marcus had pulled me into his mess. I was 16, and he'd borrowed my ID to buy liquor. When he got caught, my parents told me to take the blame. "It'll be easier if you just admit it, Avery. He has more to lose than you do." I remember sitting in the principal's office, swallowing words that tasted like ash while Marcus sat outside, smirking, free from consequence. That day, I learned silence wasn't protection. It was a cage. And here I was again, years later, trapped in the same role. My phone buzzed once more. Marcus again. I didn't answer. I wanted him to sit with his panic. I wanted him to feel the isolation he'd forced on me all these years. The messages piled up, pleading, threatening, bargaining. Each one chipped at my patience but built my resolve. I walked back to the counter, picked up the envelope again, and forced myself to read every line. Amount due $18,000. Terms immediate payment required. Signatures his and the forgery of mine. My fingers traced the false strokes of my name. Rage flared again, but beneath it was something sharper, clarity. If I let this slide, it would never end. This wasn't just about money. It was about erasure. About being used, blamed, and discarded. I folded the paper carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and set it down like evidence in a courtroom. Then I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began searching. Emails, old texts, anything he might have left behind. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, but I knew Marcus. His arrogance was always his weakness. He liked to brag. And if he'd bragged about this, he might have left me the rope I needed to hang his lies on. The search didn't give me answers right away, but it gave me something better, direction. For the first time since the envelope arrived, I wasn't just reacting. I was planning. I glanced at the clock. Midnight again. The same hour I'd stood at their table the night before, asking for a seat that was never mine. But this time I wasn't asking. This time I was preparing, and I knew one thing with certainty: I wasn't going to beg them to clear my name. I wasn't going to plead for innocence. I was going to prove it. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound in my apartment felt sharper, like the walls themselves were whispering questions I couldn't answer yet. I sat at my desk, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room. My fingers moved almost on their own, digging through folders, old emails, and texts I hadn't looked at in months. Marcus had always been careless. He liked to show off even when he should have kept quiet. I searched his name in my email archives, scrolling past old arguments and family reminders. Then I saw a message thread from almost a year ago. Attached was a screenshot he had once bragged about sending to me, a loan approval. His caption, "Easy approval with a cosigner." My stomach tightened. There it was proof he had joked about dragging someone else's name onto his debts. Back then, I had rolled my eyes and nearly deleted the thread. Now it was the breadcrumb I needed. I saved every file, every timestamp, organizing them into a folder labeled simply Evidence. By morning, the exhaustion had settled deep into my body, but adrenaline pushed me forward. I called the lender's fraud department. The woman on the other end sounded tired at first, like she'd heard every excuse before, but when I mentioned forgery, her tone shifted. "If you can provide documentation, Ms. Langford, we can open a formal investigation." That word investigation was like oxygen. I hung up the call and leaned against the counter, my hands gripping the cold edge until my knuckles ached. Later that afternoon, I walked into the bank. The lobby smelled of pine cleaner and printer ink. People lined up clutching checks and forms, their lives neat and ordinary. Mine felt like a war zone. When my number flashed, I approached the glass booth and slid the forged contract across the counter. The manager adjusted his glasses, scanned the paper, then looked back at me. "This signature doesn't match your file." Relief rushed through me, crackling in my chest. "Exactly," I said, "because I never signed it." He nodded slowly, lowering his voice. "We'll need a sworn statement. And if you have supporting evidence, texts, emails, bring them. This isn't the first complaint we've had against your brother." My breath caught. Not the first. Those 3 words stuck with me as I walked back out into the cold. Snow had begun to fall, heavy flakes clinging to my coat. The street was quieter than usual, as if the world itself was listening. If Marcus had done this before, how many others had been pulled into his lies? That night, while organizing the evidence, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. A voice I hadn't heard in years filled the line. "Avery, it's Claire. We went to high school together. Claire had once been my roommate in college for a semester before life pulled us in different directions." She sounded nervous. "I heard you're having trouble with Marcus. I thought you should know. He did something similar to me. Back when I applied for a student loan, somehow his name ended up on my paperwork. I didn't push it, but I lost my scholarship because of the mess." He laughed when I confronted him. Told me I should be grateful he even remembered my name. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. Marcus hadn't just made a mistake. He had a pattern. Claire's voice softened. "Be careful, Avery. He doesn't like being cornered." After the call ended, I sat there in silence, staring at the stack of papers and screenshots on my desk. My pulse was steady, but my chest felt heavy. For years, they had convinced me my silence was loyalty, that keeping secrets was love. But it wasn't. It was rot. I printed everything I had: emails, screenshots, the fake contract. The sound of the printer grinding out page after page felt like a drumbeat. Proof. Something no smirk or dismissal could erase. I thought back to the night before, to the chandelier flickering over my head as they told me I wasn't chosen. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't chosen for their table. But that didn't make me weak. It made me free to choose my own way of fighting back. As I packed the evidence into a folder, I caught sight of myself in the darkened window. For the first time, I didn't see the shadow they had painted me to be. I saw someone standing on the edge of something bigger. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the group chat. "Dad, this will destroy us. Think before you act, Marcus. Don't make a mistake you'll regret. Mom, families don't take each other to war." I typed slowly, deliberately. Families don't forge signatures. Then I set the phone down. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was begging to be seen. I was holding the one thing they couldn't ignore the truth. But the manager's words kept echoing in my head. This isn't the first complaint, and that left me with a question I wasn't ready to answer. Yet just how many lies had Marcus built his life on, and how deep would I have to dig to expose them? The knock came just after sunset, heavy and patient. Not like the courier's careful tap days earlier, this one was meant to remind me I had no choice but to open the door. I froze in the middle of the room folder of evidence still spread across the coffee table. The knock came again, followed by my mother's voice seeping through the wood. "Avery, we need to talk. Open this door." I almost didn't. But then I thought of that forged signature of the laughter at the table of every time they told me silence was for the family's good. I turned the lock and pulled the door open. They filed in like a procession. My mother first, perfume sharp as cut roses. My father next, stiff and grim, carrying himself like he was about to deliver a verdict. And Marcus, last eyes darting jaw, tight, his whole body buzzing with frantic energy. Mom didn't waste time. "You've taken this too far. Families don't air dirty laundry in public." I walked back to the table and set the forged contract in the center, pressing my palm flat against it. "Families don't forge signatures." The room went still for a beat. Then Marcus scoffed, trying to mask his nerves with anger. "You think you're clever dragging me into this circus? You'll regret it. They're already on my side." He jabbed a finger toward our parents. "You'll end up the outsider forever." "Forever?" I asked quietly. "That already happened a long time ago." My father stepped forward, voice low but weighted. "Do you think destroying your brother will make you strong? You'll destroy us all." I laughed once, sharp and bitter. "No, I'm refusing to be destroyed with you." Marcus slammed his hand against the table. The glass rattled and his drink spilled, the stem of the glass snapping in half. A shard skittered across the wood and nicked my hand. A thin line of blood appeared bright against my skin. I looked at it for a moment, then at him. "This is what you do," I said. "You break things and then you expect me to bleed for it." My mother's voice cracked with something close to pleading. "Just withdraw the complaint, Avery. You know we've always done what's best for the family." "Best for the family," I repeated. "Not for me. Never for me." Silence stretched between us, thick as the snow piling outside. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's eyes darted. Marcus shifted like a cornered animal, rage and fear fighting for control. Finally, Mom tried again, softer. "He's your brother. You don't want him in prison, do you? He should have thought of that before stealing my name," I said. Marcus leaned in his face, inches from mine eyes, wild. "You don't understand what you're unleashing. If this sticks, I lose everything. My accounts, my job, my reputation gone." I didn't move. My voice was steady. "Then maybe you shouldn't have built everything on lies." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind howling against the windows. My cut stung as blood dotted the edge of the contract. It felt symbolic, finally visible, finally undeniable. My father was the first to break. He grabbed his coat with a sharp motion. "Let's go," he muttered. My mother hesitated, her lips trembling like she wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. Finally, she followed him. Marcus lingered at the door, his expression a mix of fury and desperation. "You think you've won, Avery. You haven't seen what comes next." I met his stare, unblinking. "Neither have you." He slammed the door behind him, the sound reverberating through the apartment. For a long moment, I just stood there, breathing hard, staring at the shard of glass on the table glinting under the lamp. The wound on my hand was shallow, but it burned. I pressed a tissue against it, watching the red stain spread. It wasn't the pain that mattered. It was the proof, physical, undeniable, that I wasn't just imagining their destruction. They had cut me over and over, and now I had no intention of letting them hide the blood anymore. I picked up the folder of evidence, tucked the shard of glass into a small envelope, and slipped both into my bag. Tomorrow, I would take them to the courthouse. But tonight, I sat back on the couch listening to the silence. For years, I'd feared being on the outside. Now I realized the outside wasn't exile. It was freedom. Still, my father's words echoed in my head. "You'll destroy us all." And for the first time, I wondered when the truth finally came out, would they try to destroy me first? The morning of the hearing was pale and brittle. Snow had fallen through the night, blanketing the courthouse steps in white. I stood outside for a moment, my breath clouding in the cold air, my bag heavy with evidence at my side. It wasn't nerves, I felt it was something sharper. Anticipation. Marcus arrived flanked by lawyers, his once perfect suit wrinkled his face hollow. My mother clutched his arm as if holding him upright could erase the headlines. My father walked a step behind jaw-locked eyes, avoiding mine. None of them spoke to me. They swept past like I wasn't there, as if pretending could undo what was about to happen. Inside the courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and paper. The judge sat high on the bench, calm but unsparing. The lender's investigator laid out the evidence piece by piece, the forged signatures, the loan terms, the complaints from others, and then the screenshot Marcus's own arrogance immortalized in pixels. Easy approval with a cosigner. The words looked almost childish projected on the screen, but they landed like a hammer. Marcus shifted in his seat, his jaw twitching. When his lawyer nudged him, he tried to speak. His voice cracked between arrogance and desperation. "This is a misunderstanding. My sister, she's exaggerating. She's always been jealous." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. Her voice was steady, final. "Forgery confirmed, cosigner cleared. Restitution and penalties to follow." The gavel struck, a sound so small yet it cracked open years of silence. For a moment, I just sat there breathing, letting the weight of it settle. Proof had become power, and power, in this case, was freedom. Outside the courthouse, the snow kept falling, soft flakes catching in my hair. Behind me, I could hear my family arguing in fractured voices. My mother's sharp whisper, my father's low growl, Marcus's rising panic. But their words no longer reached me. Marcus called my name once raw jagged, but I didn't turn. For years I had begged for recognition. Now I didn't need it. I walked down the courthouse steps, each one lighter than the last. Across the street, people bustled with their own lives, oblivious to the collapse happening behind me. It struck me then the fortress my parents had built around Marcus's image wasn't shattered by me. It had rotted from within, and daylight had simply exposed it. That night, I sat by my window, the city wrapped in snow hush. Across the street, a neighbor lit candles, the warm glow spilling against frosted glass. It reminded me of the New Year's Eve table I'd been denied. But the difference was clear. Theirs had been performance. This was truth. My phone buzzed again, Marcus's name. I let it ring, then fade. Minutes later, a message appeared. "You don't understand. If this goes public, I'm finished. Please, withdraw the complaint." I stared at the screen, then typed slowly, "You finished me long ago. Now I'm just writing the ending." I hit send. When the silence returned, it wasn't heavy anymore. It was steady, like a shield. 2 days later, my parents showed up uninvited. Their knock was softer this time, hesitant. I opened the door because I was tired of hiding. My father looked older, his shoulders stooped. My mother's eyes darted restless, her usual sharpness dulled. "You're making us a spectacle," my father muttered. "No," I replied softly. "I'm showing the spectacle you've hidden." For once, they had no retort. My mother looked at me as though searching for the daughter she had buried beneath Marcus's shadow. My father's lips pressed into a thin line, but he said nothing. They left, soon after their footsteps fading, like an old habit breaking. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling. The apartment didn't feel small anymore. It felt like territory reclaimed. On the windowsill, I placed a single candle and lit it. The flame flickered, soft but steady, casting light against the glass. I whispered to myself, not in anger, but in certainty. They thought they could erase me. But I am still here. The snow outside kept falling, quiet and endless, covering the city in white. For the first time, I didn't long for a seat at anyone else's table. I would build my own, smaller maybe, but honest, and that was enough. The morning after the hearing, I walked the city streets with snow crunching under my boots. The world looked the same, but I didn't. For the first time, I wasn't carrying their weight. The shame, the silence, the endless role of cleaning up after Marcus, it was gone. My phone buzzed with more family messages, but I didn't read them. Their voices no longer had power over me. At home, the candle I'd lit still burned on the windowsill, its flame steady against the winter night. I realized then freedom isn't about being invited to their table. It's about building one of your own. And mine, no matter how small, would finally be a place where I belonged. If this story struck a chord with you, share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter of betrayal and resilience. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life.